Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here or tuning in for today's town hall presentation. I want to start with something that is a cause of intense grief for many of us, and that's the sudden loss of our Chief of Police, Tom Ingalls. I think most of you know that we lost Tom quite unexpectedly this last weekend. And for those of us who knew him well, this is a tremendous loss. It's not just a loss for our police department, but it's a loss for the university here and for the University of Texas. He was an incredible leader whose impact spanned the entire system and even around the world, given his growing international reputation for expertise in biosecurity. We don't have any information about memorials for Tom or a memorial service. Obviously, his family is intensely stricken with grief right now, and so we want to be supportive of them. At some point in time, I want us to do a memorial here for Tom to recognize his many contributions and the marvelous legacy of leadership that he left with our police department and with all of us who knew him and worked with him regularly. So more to come on that front, but I think we all feel his loss and loved him very much as an individual and a colleague, and certainly want to be supportive of his family during this very difficult time. So moving into the agenda, these are the things I'd like to cover today. I think I've mentioned in previous town hall meetings that in my smaller group meetings, the town halls on the road, as we call them, with people around the university at different sites and different settings, I get a lot of feedback. I've gotten a lot of feedback, and they pretty much directed me to always cover some of these agenda items. The two things that are most commonly mentioned are what's happening with our facilities. So we'll spend some time with that, and the interest vary from, I want to know what's going on, where are we going with those, to what in the world is blocking access to my parking? And so we'll talk a little bit about where we are with facilities today. Clearly, we want to talk about best care and where we stand with that. And for an unforeseen circumstance, we don't have a lot of new information, but we'll also talk about that. Just a kind of a brief request relative to Mondays in March. You all know that March is halfway through the fiscal year for us, and we typically ask our executive leaders to talk about how we're doing with our plans, how we're doing with progress towards our goals, and where we think we're going over the remainder of the fiscal year as well as into the next fiscal year during those Mondays in March presentations. But this year we'd like to mix it up a little bit and ask for more input and direction, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I want to spend some time with financial results. I think most of you know we're not where we wanted to be, not where we forecast to be, so we'll talk a little bit about that and what we're doing about it. Just a reminder about our institutional priorities, and then some recognition, and then again a quick review of what I think I've tried to say today. So we'll launch into it. So here on our Galveston campus, I think you don't have to look very far from this building to see the Health Education Center. We're at the point of topping it out. Mike, how close are we to topping out of the building? 2 weeks away. So we're very excited about that. I think our educators are engaged and certainly being represented by colleagues as we think about how we best use this marvelous new resource to extend our educational capabilities. I think most of you are aware that Dr. Jacobs has asked Dr. Janet Sutherland to join us, and this is one of her principal responsibilities, is to make sure that we're all coming together and we think about how we best use the incredible simulation opportunity that we'll have with the new equipment in the building, the space to bring our people and our students together. And our educators today talk about collisions between people and students. And those collisions may be planned in terms of a small group of learners coming together with a faculty member, or they might be unplanned, where an individual student walks into the health education center and encounters one or two other students, either from their study group or from another, or perhaps even from another school. And they begin to talk about something of interest, and it allows either for learning associated with their degree program or the professional program, or some other form of learning, which is likely to be important in terms of their ability to function as a professional. And so this building has been designed with the idea of creating an intense level of collisions, not the kind that cause physical damage, but the kind that allow us to learn very intensely and very effectively. So again, we're very excited about it, and excited that Dr. Sutherland has joined us. Dr. Mouton said that was okay, so I guess, Charles, that's okay. Okay, all right, very good. I thought you'd agree. The John Seeley Hospital modernization is proceeding. Again, you don't have to look very far to see the progress on the building. The brick removal is complete. The steel insets, which are the additions to the skeleton of the building that allow us to expand the size of the patient rooms, are being put in place now. Demolition is in progress on levels 4 and 5 of the A and B wings. We're also progressing with moving our mock-ups along, trying to simulate what the rooms might be like, how they will accommodate our patients, family members, and our providers in the most effective and efficient way. And so I think we're moving towards the finalization of the mock-up sometime next month, correct? So, okay, shaking heads, so that means yes, I guess. And the overall completion date, still on track for the spring of 2020. 17E is a new important addition to our research capabilities, focused mostly on support for research involving animals. So it's a 6-story building. Of course, the first floor is now, like most of our spaces on campus, it's essentially public space that allows welcoming people into the building, giving them direction, also a gathering place. Again, that's designed to withstand the flood risk that we have here, allow us to accommodate that. As we move up into the building, the second floor space is mostly ARC, Animal Resource Center support space. As we move up to level 3, that's vivarium space. Also, level 3 accommodates the Sky Bridge, which connects to our other research buildings. Level 4 is mechanical space. Level 5 will remain shelled for now. We have several opportunities to use that space in support of research. And then level 6 is also vivarium space. As you know, particularly with the work that we're doing in infectious diseases, the animal work is critical, and we have to provide great care for our animals, make sure that they're appropriately supported as we use them as important resources to further our research. And so this building is really designed to meet our current needs as well as future ones. So we're excited about all 3 of those. Also on the Galveston campus, we've pretty much completed all of the modifications of what we call our district heating and cooling system. And this is the system that moves hot and chilled water around the campus. Some of you who were here during or after Ike remember all the issues we had with the old steam systems. We use steam as a principal part of the heating and cooling system for our buildings. And of course, we learned the hard way how vulnerable steam-based systems are to flooding. So this was a huge project, one of the largest of the Ike recovery and mitigation projects to replace the steam systems, for the most part, with hot water systems. Changes in engineering and materials allowed us to use hot water the way we use steam, with efficient transfer of energy and heat. So that's pretty much complete, along with that hot and cold water distribution system. We also created the opportunity to generate our own electricity, about 15 megawatts using 2 big generators. We also created space to double that production capacity over the course of time. I think I'm right, Mike, or is Marcel here? Okay, all right, so you can fill in for Marcel. Would you be Marcel today? So on a daily basis, the entire campus at full load uses around 30 megawatts? 28 megawatts a day, and so that's a huge power consumption. Obviously, we're the largest consumer on the island. And so the core building, our building set, which is what we try to protect and keep operational during the course of a major emergency situation, particularly a weather emergency situation, uses between 15 to 18 megawatts. So again, this is designed to allow us to produce an appropriate amount of electrical supply that can supply us during the course of a storm. Now, we have generator capacity too. We have redundancy with generators. But this has done a lot in terms of ensuring that our core operations, those in support of the healthcare operations, as well as critical support for animals and other resources that we need to preserve, will have an appropriate power supply that can withstand any sort of weather problem or other challenge. So again, a huge project, marvelous work by our facilities folks and everybody involved, and that pretty much is now complete. Jenny Seeley Level 6 is being completed, built out to accommodate cardiology service, invasive cardiology service, and some of our imaging needs associated with it. This is something that's been planned for a while, but clearly the renovation of the John Seeley is going to displace the current cardiology labs, which are in the towers. And so this project is on track to be completed in time for the invasive cardiology service to move over into the Jenny Seeley, which will remain its home, and then allow us to use that vacated space, renovate that space in the John Seeley Towers, and use it in support of our other programs, which will remain in the John Seeley Towers. And finally, in the emergency department, we've been doing renovations to accommodate that bio-containment critical care unit that the state partially funded for us, wanted us to construct. So that is nearing completion, the moves associated with that nearing completion. I think all of that will be wrapped up later in this calendar year. On the League City campus, what we call the Phase 2 expansion of the hospital, the proposal for that will be taken to the regents for their meeting at the end of next month. You can see on the slide that this involves finishing out some of the existing shell space, as well as adding a new patient bed tower, a 5-level tower, which will have space for about 60 patient beds. We hope the regents will approve that, and as soon as they do, we'll begin construction. Now, if you pass by the site or you're regularly there, you've probably noticed the parking garage. That's to the north of the existing hospital building, the ambulatory specialty care building that's there. This is going to be a 7-level facility that has attached a multi-use building, which we will initially use mostly for clinical support space, but which can be expanded over the course of time to add support or even add clinical space in support of clinical needs on that campus. The garage will be connected by a sky bridge. You can now see the skeleton of the sky bridge up there on that site. We anticipate having this operational in June of this calendar year. The parking garage will support our needs for patient and staff, as well as those of MD Anderson. Also, if you pass by the site, you've seen the MD Anderson building. It's coming along nicely. They intend for its first phase of operation to be started in the summer of this calendar year, and then we will have a clinic space on level 2 of that building, which will be operational shortly after MD Anderson begins operations in its building there. Now, a number of faculty have asked me about this. There have been some concerns expressed about the collaboration and about MD Anderson coming in and walking over our cancer program and destroying it, displacing faculty. I've heard all sorts of things. Ms. Sallenberger is actually prepared now, or preparing to come out and speak to groups of faculty and staff about the collaboration. I think MD Anderson and UTMB are very excited about the opportunity that comes with this collaboration. There's risk associated with it for both organizations if we don't do it well. But that's true with anything that has value or has the potential to bring value. The leadership of both organizations, as well as the leadership of the UT system, are very excited about the opportunities associated with this collaboration. But all three groups understand that there's risk associated with it, and we all have to work together to make it work. One of the things that I typically say when people ask me about collaboration is that it's messy and it's time-consuming. I don't know of any situation involving a significant collaboration between groups in healthcare that has been easily planned and easily executed. There are always challenges, but again, we accept those. And think about UTMB's history. How many times have we created collaborations for the benefit of patients? Our history is filled with marvelous examples of collaboration within UTMB and with other organizations outside UTMB. My expectation is that this one is not going to be any different. It's going to be great. It will be messy. It's time-consuming. It won't be perfect from the outset. But what we're focused on is the opportunity to more broadly and more significantly impact and improve cancer care for all patients with cancer, not just those with commercial insurance or those who are Medicaid or Medicare, but all patients. And we have an opportunity with this collaboration to have a much broader impact, particularly in our part of Texas and across East Texas. And so to me, that ought to be what drives us forward, the opportunity to make a difference. So we're going to continue to go at it. Yeah, there's risk. Yeah, there's a possibility the whole thing could blow up, but we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make it work. All right, so we had a couple of clinics that were hit pretty hard by Harvey. The one in Dickinson, the RMCHP clinic there, as well as our Texas City Primary and Specialty Care Clinic. I think most of you who are clinicians now know that both of those clinics are operating again. Certainly happy to see that. I think we have one remaining task at Texas City, and that is to get the audiology booth back in service there. But it's certainly nice to have these repairs behind us to be able to restore our outpatient clinical configuration to what it was prior to Harvey and move forward. So thanks to all involved for making that happen so quickly. All right, the John Seeley Fire update. There was an article in the Galveston County Daily News, probably, I think it was the Thursday before the Martin Luther King weekend freeze. And it was sort of veiled criticism of UTMB and alleged on the basis of the interpretation of the state fire marshal's report that we weren't in compliance with code, and essentially that we put our patients and our staff at risk because of the condition of the John Seeley. Now, in defense of the writer, number one, state fire marshal's reports are difficult to understand. They're full of technical jargon. Number two, in looking at some aspects of the report, there weren't clear conclusions stated. It was more a collection of findings, so a reader would have to sort of come to their own conclusions reading through the technical jargon. Thirdly, the writer actually sent the article here in draft form prior to publication, but we hadn't had the chance to really look through that fire marshal's report in detail, compare it to the article before his deadline, so we weren't able to respond. And so he asked for a response. We just didn't have enough time to do it right. So in essence, just looking at what was published, for those of you who are concerned about this, all of our systems were fully functional. at the time of the fire. Now, one of the quotes one of the descriptions in the article said that the fire was in a construction zone. It wasn't. It was in an area adjacent to the construction, which really wasn't being used. Pretty low traffic area. The old surgery waiting room there adjacent to the elevator bank in the John Seeley Towers. Also, there was something in there about some hospital official here basically said, well, they weren't quite sure if this was arson. Well, whoever you are, I'd appreciate it if you'd come to my office later and tell me the basis for that conclusion, because it's certainly not mine, and I'm not sure what you were trying to accomplish by making that statement to a media outlet. That wasn't very helpful. There were no technological failures that led to smoke spreading through the hospital. The fire marshal noted on the outside of the fire doors, which entered into that elevator lobby from the area of the annex, that there was smoke coating on the outside of the doors. Yes, there was, because those doors were used to access that area, and the smoke came around the doors and stained the other side. But a number of us had a chance to actually tour that area, and it was very clear those fire doors worked exactly as they should have. The opposite side was completely charred. The lights above were melted. Everything was burned off of the walls. But on the other side of the doors, the flooring, the wall structures, the lights, everything was intact. So there's no evidence that the doors failed. There was staining, but that's what you would expect if those doors were used to access that area anytime during the course of the fire with such intense smoke production. Also, there was something in there, and I'm trying to remember the phrase. Jack Tarpley, you may be able to help me. Something about something with the elevator shafts and smoke. What did they call them? Smoke, not evacuators, smoke. Smoke barriers, yeah. There's no such thing. I'm not sure what that was all about, but again, the elevator shafts functioned exactly as they were supposed to. All of our smoke evacuation equipment functioned. Now, was there smoke spread through the building? Yeah, because we were using doors to evacuate patients. And so that's expected as we go forward during the course of a fire like that. The other point in the article that I remember was that we weren't up to code in terms of having repeaters to support the fire department's radios. Well, what code actually requires are the plug-in systems through the fire alarm and detection systems that allow the fire department to plug in and use that system. The fire department chose not to use that system. They used their radios. There's no code requirement for us associated with their decision to use their radios. Now again, their decision, and fire departments today commonly use their radios as opposed to those built-in communication systems because number one, they're worried about the integrity of them, and number two, considering the mobility necessary to fight today's fires with the technology that's available, the radio is a more efficient tool. But again, those of you who are Ike veterans, remember that we learned during and after Ike, there are dead spots in the John Seeley Towers where radio waves don't transmit very well. And so they ran into the same issue. So our response is, at our expense, even though it's not a code requirement, it's relatively low cost for us. We're going to go ahead and install those repeaters. Heaven forbid we ever face that situation in the John Seeley Tower again, but we'll install those repeaters so the fire department can use their radios. So that's where we are. There were no code violations. Nobody did anything to endanger our staff, our patients, or the fire department. We learned a lot. You always do in a situation like this. But we had done all of the right things, and we are absolutely dedicated to making sure that our emergency systems always work. We check them regularly. In fact, if they don't check out, we can't have ongoing accreditation by the Joint Commission and all these groups that come in and look at us. So it's absolutely critical that we maintain our emergency containment and control detection systems so that we're safe and so that we meet our accreditation standards. So that's enough about that, but I just wanted to respond. Now, I know I always hear from people, well, how come you didn't put that out at the time? Well, again, we didn't have enough time to respond well. We don't like to respond halfway. We want to make sure that we transmit accurate information. We prepared the response that Friday. I think the article came out on Thursday, and then the freeze hit. So we were all occupied with making sure, again, that our folks were safe, our patients were secure, we had reasonable plans relative to the inclement weather. And what we ended up doing is posting this information on the website. It's out there if you'd like to go look at it in greater detail. But anyway, we want to make sure that we respond appropriately and there's good information for everybody to review. All right, so best care. And Dr. Sharma's here, so he can help me with this in case I get off track. What we had hoped to do is to give you an update on where we stand right now. We were supposed to get the information on January 19th. Is that right, Gulshan? Okay. But we didn't get it. They delayed the relaying of results until February, March? Okay, all right. So it's delayed for a bit. Now, there's all kinds of speculation why they delayed it. But we think it's related to the fact that the methodology has changed. And this is pretty common for Vizient. They continue to modify their methodology to make sure that the standards, the metrics are all associated with appropriate and the highest levels of excellence and performance with regard to quality patient care. So we know what the changes in methodology are. It kind of reclassifies where we stand within the different groups that Vizient uses for comparison purposes. It also has changed the weighting of some of the metrics and standards. And so we continue with our work as we did before. It really hasn't caused us to shift our focus, our approach. We want to be the best in everything, and we're looking at everything. We're reviewing everything to continue to be the best we can. We just don't know exactly where we stand relative to the new methodology. So more to come on that front. When we get that update, we'll put it out, and then if necessary, we'll adjust our strategy. Anything else I should say, Gulshan? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So I mentioned Mondays in March, and this is the way we're scheduled right now. Ms. Sollenberger will start this on March the 5th. Dr. Jacobs on March the 12th, Ms. Sadro on March the 19th, and then we'll wrap up with a little bit of a panel discussion to try to hit the high points and also offer more opportunities for questions with the final session at the end of March. But as I mentioned at the outset of today's presentation, we'd love some feedback. You know, what are the things that you're seeing relative to the health system, academic enterprise, institutional support, or anything else, some combination? What would you like to know more about? What are you concerned about? What are you not seeing that you think you should? So if you just send those suggestions to me or one of the EVPs, we'll get them included and try to cover those questions or concerns during Mondays in March. Again, we want to be as informative as we can, as transparent, and respond to the need to know that's out there among our staff and faculty and students. All right, so let's talk about financials. And let me start with this. Now, this is the format that we've started using, just kind of a shortened format that gives an abbreviated statement of where we stand. So remember that here we are with FY17 results, actual, what our actual results are for 18, the variance between actual results in the fiscal year 17 to 18. And then here's the FY18 budget numbers, where we budgeted to be. We compare that to the actual numbers, and that results in these variance calculations here. So if you look at where we wanted to be with the budget, 8.8 million positive, and you look at where we are actually, it's a pretty significant gap. And obviously that's very worrisome. Now, we continue to kind of look at where we stand, what happened, how do we get back on track, and I've got a slide that's coming up that essentially describes why we think we got here. In fact, let me just get to that. Number one, and I talked a little bit about this during my last town hall, Harvey. Harvey hit at the beginning of the fiscal year. Activity dropped, inpatient and outpatient, and we have seen about a $9–10 million hit associated with the passage of Harvey. Now, what we typically have seen after a big weather event like this, a regional weather event, is the volume comes roaring back. Typically on the inpatient side, a little bit before the outpatient side, just given the distribution. And that's not really untrue with the current situation. But what hasn't come back is the same acuity of cases, the same case mix. So what we're seeing relative to what occurred last year are cases that produce a lesser amount of revenue because the patients aren't as sick, the procedures aren't as complicated, the acuity is not as high. Now, is this a Harvey effect? Probably, to some extent. We still have a lot of people who are out of their homes, who are struggling with the financial challenge associated with Harvey, and they are deferring elective and in some cases needed health care for as long as they can. Now, also we have to consider, did our forecast model fail? And we think it probably did. We didn't have a model that was as effective as it needed to be to consider what we were seeing last year versus what we might see this year. And another way to state that is we'd like to have a little more compliance in our forecasting models that would allow us to be a little bit more conservative so that we don't over budget revenue. Now, should we be pointing the finger at our finance folks or operating folks or whatever? No, absolutely not. These are the sorts of things that we learn over the course of time. But the combination of Harvey at the beginning of the fiscal year, the impact with acuity of cases, changes, patients' decisions to defer care, other things that would cause that acuity to not be where it was last year, has for the most part resulted in this revenue shortfall. Now, there are some reimbursement rate changes associated with some decisions of the legislature that were made after we did our budget, which also had a couple of $1 million worth of impact. But in essence, it's sort of the perfect storm, no pun intended, relative to us being pretty far off budget just 4 months into the fiscal year. Now, it's a challenge, and going forward, we're going to have to change how we work to overcome the challenge. So here are the things that we're considering. Clearly, coding and documentation are critical in terms of accurately describing what our providers are doing and how we document what we do and how that's coded into a bill helps determine revenue. There are always opportunities in organizations like ours to improve documentation, to improve coding, and to improve the billing process and ultimately the bills. And so it makes great sense for us to focus on this now. We're always focusing on it to some extent, but we really want to scrutinize what we're doing with clinical documentation and coding, work with our physicians and providers, not to add to their burden, but to help them understand what is optimal documentation. And why is that important in terms of coding and transmission to billing? So we have a lot of attention focused on that right now, and that will continue to be the case over the coming months. Now, as we think about the issue with acuity of cases, obviously we want that acuity to go back towards what we forecast it to be. Well, the way to manage that is to look across the demand for clinical service. We know there's a lot of demand, right? The wait times are long. So particularly for some forms of specialty care. But to look across that demand, and particularly for those patients who are sicker and in need of more intense services, if we can, fast track their visit, get them in quicker, get them evaluated as soon as possible, and then provide that care for them. That's what we're supposed to do anyway. If you think about that, that's just an extension of our triage activities. But we want to do that better as we go forward. And as we do that, we think we also have an opportunity, looking down to bullet 4, to improve patient access, throughput, and satisfaction while we continue to work to decrease wait times. Now, the third bullet, something that we continue to do with our health system operations, management, labor, and supply cost. And the reason this is such an issue with the health system is because it's variable based on demand. So for Dr. LeDuc, if I get this wrong, just tell me. But you know, for Dr. LeDuc, as he's planning activities for the GNL with the scientists and the staff who work there, you know, the grant activity comes and goes, but in general, they know what their supply costs will be, what their labor costs should be, and they work to make sure the resources are in place. With healthcare, it's different. It's seasonal. Like the flu season right now is really driving inpatient admissions, particularly for medical care as opposed to surgical care. And so that changes the way that we have to manage our staffing and supply costs. So it makes sense for us in a time of financial challenge to really focus in on that and look at what we can do to better manage our labor and supply costs. So, and there are other things that we're looking at. You know, if all of us would just, when we leave in the evening, if we work in an office or a space and it's going to be vacated, just turn off the lights and shut down our computers, it would result in pretty significant savings. I have to admit, I'm guilty. Sometimes I just go running out of my office. I want to get out of there in a hurry. I leave my computer on. And so I'm going to make a point to turn it off now and turn my lights off when I go out. So just simple things like that. Other things we can do, we continue to look at. Looking at expenses is critically important. Now, you know, those of you who are veterans at UTMB know we've been in this situation before, and we always work our way through it. But one of the things that we have to do is think on both sides of the balance sheet, okay, or the income statement. That is, we need to think about revenue. We can't stop investing. We can't stop improving. We can't stop focusing on excellence. At the same time, we also have to look at expenses. Are there things that we can delay, we can put off? Can we modify our priorities, at least till we get a chance to climb a little further out of the hole as we go forward, and then adjust for the longer term based on how things are going? So that's the situation we're in. Another way to put it is, you know, we're on that side of the mountain now, along with a lot of other academic and healthcare organizations. Some of you may have seen some of these headlines about big cuts, performance that hasn't been what was expected or forecast at places like UTMB. It's not just here. It's across the country. It's in the Texas Medical Center institutions. You notice TCH and MD Anderson on this list. There are rumors that the Methodist Hospital Houston, isn't hitting its projected operational performance. They don't publicly report it, but it seems to be common knowledge that they have some challenges too. This is healthcare today. The big forecasting groups that look at economic sectors and talk about how each is going to do are saying that healthcare institutions over the course of the next 3 to 5 years are going to struggle even more than they have, because expenses are going up, reimbursement is relatively stable and in some cases falling, and that's going to put additional pressure on those institutions and the system as a whole. And if they are private organizations that issue stock, the recommendation if you're an investor is to avoid the healthcare sector. So again, this is something that's not just peculiar to UTMB, it's something that's occurring with places like us. There's a list of some of the big academic health centers that have recently announced that they're not hitting their financial targets, they're laying off people, they're making changes in programs to try to accommodate all of the changes, the current operating conditions in healthcare. So what we're seeing, probably accelerated by Harvey, but also a symptom of the times. And so we need to continue to focus on this, think about what is our mission work, how does that translate, what are our priorities. If something isn't a priority, maybe we want to step away from it for the short term or even for the longer term. So thinking about how we work, how we deploy our resources and our people, and continuing to focus on efficiency as we go forward. And after all, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be involved in shaping the future of healthcare. That's what academic health institutions do. That means when challenges come along, we're leaders in terms of developing the response to the challenges. So we have an opportunity now, unfortunately a little bit more of an opportunity than I wanted, to be a leader on that front, but we're going to do that. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. Now, how many of you just heard me announce layoffs? All right, so when you leave here, I didn't announce any layoffs, okay? So, again, now if something really turns critical, that's an emergency step that an organization might take, but we don't have any plans for that right now. That said, we always look at programs. We're always thinking about how we use people. We might change our hiring approach. We might do other things. Again, not because we're in an emergency so much, and that we need to continue to climb this mountain, get beyond this icy patch, and continue to be able to do our mission work. Our priorities haven't changed. These are our current institutional priorities. Now, this doesn't encompass everything we do, but obviously we have to continue to attract and hold on to really great people. And we have some challenges on this front. The workforce supply is pretty small for some of the sorts of people that we need and isn't necessarily getting better. So we have to respond to the growing competition in a way that allows us to continue to recruit good people. We have to retain them. Right now we have an issue with our faculty. Our faculty compensation isn't where it needs to be as a whole. And so we're going to have to make selective investments in faculty compensation to be able to continue to attract and retain great faculty as we go forward. Best care obviously indicates excellence. It's where we should be with regard to our role in shaping the future of health care. Growth, we can't cut our way to success. We need to invest as we go forward. Invest wisely, not too broadly, but continue to grow those programs that are consistent with our mission goals and where we have the greatest opportunity. Analytics, big data, predictive analytics, the wave now and into the future. Being able to use information in a more timely way, in a way that better supports decision-making, improving the efficiency of decision-making as well as operations. So we'll continue to focus on analytics and what it brings and expanding our analytical capacity and capability. Research support, we're an academic institution. We can't be left behind. We live and die by what happens with the research here. It's an important part of being involved in the future of healthcare, and we need to do a better job. Again, we want to make sure we don't get left behind in terms of our ability to attract research and researchers. And of course, education's our bread and butter. We have this beautiful new facility coming online, enhanced capabilities, but we want to think about how we use that most effectively. And not only for our student learners who are here today, but for those who will be here in the future, and all of us who have been doing this for a long time need to continue to learn. So how do we do a better job of making those opportunities available and making sure that we have the most up-to-date workforce of providers and people who support the clinical work that we do. So again, the priorities haven't changed. It's just a little bit bigger challenge associated with them than we wanted, but we'll respond. Now, of course, I always like to do a little recognition. Hopefully, I'm setting a good example. So I look across the audience and I see a lot of our leaders here. You don't have to raise your hand, but I want to ask you, as a leader in this organization, how many times this week have you said thank you to one of the people who works with you? Have you recognized them for a routine achievement or something that's special? It means a lot to our people. And it also helps them understand that they are contributing on an individual basis to addressing those priorities and accomplishing our mission goals. So if you haven't done it, please do so. Please just say thank you. Maybe, I think most of you probably participate in relays. That's a great time to call somebody out or call out several people in your relay group and say thank you to them or recognize something they've done professionally or in their private life. Maybe they had a son or daughter who made an all-star sports team, who are on the honor roll, something like that. All of those things help make sure that our people understand that they're valued, they play a critical role in our success, and help them feel that they're engaged in making a difference. So anyway, please think about that. Think about ways to do that. First, I want to recognize Robert Hastet and Josette Armendariz Batiste, who were very involved. They were nominated because they were faced with a critical patient care situation. We were in a situation where a dialysis contract was suddenly being terminated. We're in the process of trying to negotiate something, and we had patients in need of dialysis and weren't exactly sure how to use the resources that were available to get those services available to us. They put their heads together, came up with a really nice, innovative approach, and helped us get through that challenge. In fact, do something new in terms of delivering dialysis services at the bedside in Angleton, Danbury, and League City. So are you guys here? Would you come forward, please? I want to recognize you for great work. Thank you very much. Yeah, that was really incredible. Great story. Thank you both. This one I probably can't mess up. I can figure out who's who. Let's turn around. We'll get a picture here. Got it. Thank you all very much. Great work. Next are three of the guys from our facilities group, and they were intently involved in the renovation of the Ronald McDonald House. And of course, that's a critical resource in terms of our pediatric burns management program. It serves as a base, a home for our patients and families during a critical challenge in their lives. And we had to take it offline. We just had some things that weren't working there that required a total shutdown for about 7 months. And these guys worked very hard with their colleagues to make sure that we did that as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And most importantly, we're there during the startup, available during the startup to take care of those things that inevitably arise after construction. And so the folks at Ronald McDonald actually nominated these three for recognition because apparently we opened and we were still in the process of finishing up some of the punch list items. We had a very severely burned young man who was in a room and something happened. The room support systems dysfunctioned. And it was at the end of the day and These guys otherwise would have been home or going home. And so they got an urgent call from the folks at Ronald McDonald describing the situation. And rather than say, oh, well, we'll turn it over to somebody else, or, we'll be there tomorrow or whatever, recognizing that a patient was disadvantaged and probably in pain and certainly uncomfortable, went right over and solved the problem. So again, that's the sort of dedication and commitment that we see with our folks so often, and it always deserves a thank you and recognition. So I'd like for Raymond Morales, Leonard Lacombe, and Joel Long to come forward and be recognized. Thank you, gentlemen. Great work. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Now let's make sure I get this right. Joel, that's you. Sonny. All right. Leonard. Okay. Thank you. We'll get a photo. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the great work. And finally, members of our transplant team. And of course, the transplant folks do incredible work looking at a lot of details relative to the needs of transplant candidates, looking at the details of the organs that are available for match, working with the surgeons and the support care team to make sure that everything works, that patients get through the course of their surgery, as well as that critical post-op recovery period, minimizing the chance for any sort of complication and certainly the rejection of the transplanted organ. So this particular case, as I understand it, involved a lot of those details, the matching of the potential donor with the available organ. A lot of the work was done by an outside lab. Patient was coming here, organ was made available, things were moving along. Part of the protocol is that we draw the blood of the patient and do one more review of the match between the organ and the patient. And so they were involved in doing that and noted that the outside lab had made a critical mistake. And so they stopped the process. We always talk about in healthcare, stopping the train, pulling that cord. Sometimes as an individual, you're in that situation. Small group, a team, you're in that individual, even though it has huge ramifications relative to the system and care and progress. Sometimes it's necessary to stop that train for the sake of patients and patient safety. And that's what this team did. So I just want to thank them for doing that. It's pretty easy, particularly when you're busy and sorting through a lot of details, to say, what's the risk that this outside group of experts got that wrong? We'll just do this in a perfunctory manner and it'll be okay. Well, that's a problem, and it creates an opportunity for a huge mistake and an error. And these four didn't succumb to that sort of risk. And so I just want to say thank you to them, invite them to come forward. Janine, Daniel, Velvet, and Mary Ann to come forward and be recognized for their work. Thank you very much. Great job. Great job. Thank you very much. All right. Let's see. Okay, Daniel. Velvet. Mary Ann. All right. Janine.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. We'll do a photo here. Thank you very much. Now, one of the things you might notice on this slide is that we had the Way to Go Awards and we have the Go Team Award. We started a few months back creating this second category to recognize larger groups. We obviously have a lot of people who work in teams, and so we didn't want to miss the opportunity to recognize teams. It might be 2, might be 102. So if there are large groups that you see performing very well or doing something extraordinary or just doing their job and resisting that urge to make a mistake and trying to make things go forward, please feel free to nominate them for this Go Team Award. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that UT System Regents now have an award for employees, Outstanding Employee. This follows along with the Outstanding Teachers Award and the Outstanding Clinicians Awards that we're creating. We have an opportunity to nominate 6 or more individuals for this award. The deadline for nominations is February 4th. Our Employee Advisory Council is managing the nominations process. There's information out there on the website. But we certainly have more than 6 people who are deserving of nomination for recognition by our regents for the great work they do. So please take a look at that. Think about people that we should nominate as an organization. There are some specifications relative to the nomination, but we can get through those. If you struggle with those, just call us and we'll help ease the path to getting someone nominated. So we're very excited the regents are choosing to do this. There's a nice monetary award associated with it. So please consider who we should nominate that and nominate for this award, and let's get them in the process. All right, so key takeaways. Construction continues. We are investing for the future to make sure that our programs are well accommodated with the facilities and resources we have. We're very excited about that future. We're keeping our focus on best care. We don't have the most current update, but we understand the methodology and we continue our good work, and we certainly want to do everything we can to maintain that top-tier 5-star rating. We'd like some more input relative to Mondays in March about what you all would like to hear about, either get more information about or have a concern about. So please send those ideas to the EVPs and me about what you'd like to have included in those presentations or in the discussion. We talked about the financial challenge. We're about $20 million to the negative right now, where we'd like to be almost 10 to the positive. So we have a pretty good hurdle in terms of making that up, but we have an approach. We just need for everybody to be engaged as we get through this little ice patch on the way to being successful with our mission work. And finally, nothing's changed about our priorities. They're all the same. We're all working together to work wonders to make sure we have great people, that we're doing the things that we need to do that are highest priority in pursuit of improving health for all of the people out there across the state of Texas and around the world. So that's what I wanted to cover today. I'm happy to take any questions. And so obviously if you have questions, we'd be happy to be here afterwards and answer those individually, or certainly you can submit them through the Town Hall website, and we'll respond and make the answers public. So again, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the great work for the people here today all across the university. We'll keep it going forward. Thank you very much.
UTMB Health, working together to work wonders.